Good morning. Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Coming up to almost 6:30 now. Back to our main story. US President Joe Biden has defended his decision to withdraw American troops from Afghanistan, vowing not to let the war enter a third decade. The speed in which the Taliban have taken over most of the country has pretty much shocked the Western world. But now more British and American troops are being sent to assist with evacuation efforts.
Well, joined now by James Rogers, co-founder of the Council on Geostrategy. I don't know if you saw Joe Biden's speech yesterday, but you will have seen some of the highlights. What did you make of what he had to say, which was basically that this is down to the Afghan government, the speed with which the Taliban was able to do what it did?
Yeah, I did see the speech. Thanks. I think it was a good attempt at deflection. I think he's trying to hide the errors that the United States, under his leadership and the leadership of the previous President Donald Trump, has made in withdrawing from Afghanistan, and by deflecting attention onto the government of the former government of Afghanistan, he succeeds to some extent in doing that, particularly in terms of the kind of combative tone that he took. Now, of course, there were a number of problems in Afghanistan prior to the takeover of the Taliban, and there's going to be a lot of problems to come relating to corruption within the former government, the inability to control the entire territory of the country, the reliance on US forces and contractors and Western logistical support. So there were a number of problems in Afghanistan prior to the US withdrawal. But the way that withdrawal has been carried out, the lack of coordination with allies and so on and so forth, and the abrupt speed of it, I think has contributed to the situation in Afghanistan, and that in many ways is not good, neither for US power and position in the world, or the security of countries in the region or the world in general.
Good morning to you, James. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I think most people are saying that there should have been a better strategy, because even Biden himself is admitting that he didn't think the Taliban would take control quite so quickly. I think that it's very much played into their hands, hasn't it?
Yeah, there's been a gross misunderstanding of the strength and capacity, I think, of the Taliban and its ability to take control not only of provincial areas of the country, many of which it already had some influence in, but also the key cities. And alongside the failure of the Afghan National Army and various security forces to keep control of the country, and the lack of morale that sunk in once the US had declared its withdrawal, not only under Donald Trump back in 2020, but also earlier this year in 2021 under President Biden. Once that had been determined or declared, it seems that the entire system in Afghanistan that had been put in place over the last 20 years, at great cost and a great loss of life, both here in the UK and also in the US and also other NATO allies and partners, that it almost crumbled like a pack of cards, and in some ways revealed all of the efforts that we've put in over the last 2 decades to be in vain.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but it's quite clear that people were warning this was a possibility years ago. Who is advising President Biden? And I mean, what were they playing at?
Well, it's always difficult to determine, as you say, with hindsight, it's always difficult to determine just how things will change. And there have been examples in the past where we've got things fundamentally wrong. But, this is quite alarming in a way, insofar as we've put so much effort into Afghanistan over the past 20 years. And in a way, we haven't just suffered a defeat here, we've suffered not a rout as well. The situation has basically gone back to how it was in the early 2000s. Yes, we don't entirely know what the new Taliban is going to look like. But nonetheless, this is not good for the West or for the UK, to say nothing of the people of Afghanistan, including, of course, the women there. And there have already been images shown which are quite horrible of their persecution.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about your thoughts on the way that Boris Johnson's handling this. What have you made so far? And he's obviously talking about now a programme focusing on helping those that basically a lot of people feel that have been let down, really. the women, the girls, and the vulnerable as well. They're talking about helping.
Yeah, I think he's doing the best he can in the circumstances. I mean, the way that the US has withdrawn from Afghanistan has seen a lack of coordination with allies. It's very clear that British ministers, the Defence Secretary, even yesterday, have explained that this was not Britain's view or vision of how the withdrawal should be undertaken. But nonetheless, the Americans have pushed ahead regardless. And we saw, as we began with this combative speech last night from President Biden. So I think what the UK will try and do going forward is to pull together as many allies and partners as it can in NATO, but also in the broader Indo-Pacific region, to try and make a difference in Afghanistan. The issue there is this isn't a simple fix. The diplomatic solutions are rather limited, but they're actually perhaps all that's on the table at the moment, insofar as the UK and most other countries do not have the military means to exert pressure on the Taliban in the way that only the US can. And there's a whole discussion there about whether we have drawn down our military capacity to an extent that we're no longer able to act in the world with any degree of autonomy, or even by leading other allies and partners in the region. And that is something I think we need to think about going forward. But in regards to the situation in Afghanistan, I think there needs to be a great deal of coordination with allies and partners, and including the United States where possible. But there's no easy fix here. The Taliban is now in control of Afghanistan, and it seems to me that there's not really a great deal we can do on the ground to change that fact.
James, we are now where we are. We are belittled, we are embarrassed, we are probably diminished by this. But in global terms, China, Russia, what happens next?
Well, I think that China and particularly Russia are in a way rubbing their hands with glee. I don't think the coming to power of the Taliban necessarily improves their situation in terms of security. They're in many ways closer to Afghanistan than we are. And much of the fallout that occurs there is probably even going to affect them first, not only China's western provinces, where there are a number of different problems, but also in Russia's sort of underbelly, where there are also a number of security problems that have manifested themselves over the last 20 years, certainly since the collapse of the Soviet Union. But this does definitely, this is a sort of a poke in the eye for the West and the US and the UK in particular. It is, in many respects, a strategic defeat. We failed in Afghanistan to secure the objectives that we really wanted to. Yes, we've removed extremist forces, terrorists like Al Qaeda, those that I attacked, the United States on 9/11. But nonetheless, we failed in our broader objectives to improve the situation in the country and to secure that going forward. And I'm certain that the authorities in Beijing and Moscow would be very, very happy with this, humiliation.
James, very good of you to join us. James Rogers, co-founder of the Council on Geostrategy. Thank you very much for your time this morning.